I'm good.
Biosphere, aviation triggers fast forward, CTK starts sustainable aviation development, airline profitability dimensions occur twice by adoption of the F-24. Rapid air development, aviation release, and carbon pollution, high carbon altitudes have immediate impact on other issues, aviation sector protection, 2050, capital increase in substantial altitude, eliminating two seas rise, other sectors of basic target range of automation, load, insufficient production capacity, ACFO, that would cause carbon pricing influence, operational costs, and preparation decision building costs, significant provision of airlines, expensive automation, costs, additionally differences, purchasing costs of the airlines, adjusting words about minimizing the issue to assist for airline marketing way, operating from the local series, capitalist efforts to shorter travel times, and able to gain competitive advantages over large airlines. Green aviation is key to avert to proposed pollution, alters atmospheric composition. Lead 20. Aviation medical activity has connectivity linked to so many sectors, number of passengers, which able to really go the rate overshot to a small percentage of pollution being seen with reference to aviation, different chemical processes reacting to warming scenarios, CO2, black carbon, and as yield and atmospheric composition due to ocean acidification rate of emissions from aviation, contamination, transport by some people, and small ozone pollution, supersonic aircraft, visually showing degree of ozone depletion, aviation, toxic pollution, is 56 GT CO2, each layer causes extinction. 1. Climate change causes system collapse. Every movement delay increases the risk by 24. Economic intervention would have been obvious. Someone innovation device, someone see that's not a great or sort of really flexibility, and carbon source, model, reduction, GDP, 80, IBC, work on simulation, so future capability, research, and device, suggest more sensitive than most sensitive. This is special guys, we're not only getting a response to strong effect, long order, more, opportunity for reduction, reduce air risk, and that's an opportunity for water resources, with production, energy, public health, energy, redemption, security, center, permanently altered way, workforce, regulation, pollution, less, and less, other diseases, ready to see, cash, resident, work, and extra, technology, factor risk, and more fully hard and over, select the opportunity process security. Second is ozone depletion. Give it to 1. Last season, one catch depletion, ozone regulated LED radiation, vision, air surface, during last season, by natural translation, radiation, damage to the DNA level, ozone loss, huge refractory, saturated, addition of methane, increase in ultraviolet dosage. 3. Ocean acidification. Grade 22. Human activity, action setting the market movement, ocean, very limited systems of organisms, survival, small ocean, position which shell lies no longer visible from water, because I can't answer what is the environment base, elevation, less gas, and asteroid animals, ocean decline, process of mass extinction. The ourselves 1. Economic descent is a modeling, simulations proof. 17. Imposing action in the water attention and environmental conservation after revenues and pleasant realization of abuse is not that level gives the future benefit and the other revolutions rather economy to see bottles with national delivery articles efficiently. 2. Emissions are overwhelmingly concentrated in the U.S. Efficient sustainable fuel solves over 1022. North air traffic and aviation markets are innovation in the U.S. largest air traffic is in rapid 20% CO2 orders to cover aviation and country deficits in the water supply. Common for the region of the 3 times as usual. And AC the influence of CO2 warming in regard to polluters and the sustainable market significantly lower ozone. Reduce to super older various penalties and energy control. 3. Tam adjust the rate based on emission levels that guarantee solvency half C20. English to reduce emission areas more than 20 emission targets and adjustments to tax rate as well as which are the desired method to distribute downward emission lower. Lower cost of emission lower cost of higher emissions lower cost of emission lower cost of emission regardless of fuel prices and emissions. 4. Unilateral action versus a multilateral concert that goes global. Mayors 22. Carbon resistance in aviation while bilateral consider where limited machine innovative promote service equipment for airlines unilateral mechanism will involve with this provision article 15 aircraft mechanism all those and conquer the need of natural region ideas and areas that will build to America and prohibits and seeks when original benefit and mitigation beyond what that negotiate over that aircraft and local mission of benefit of ensure higher airlines aircraft limited capacity emission mitigation action is already in a clear vision only after USCP made international fuel efficiency standards national to the first time to emission of the carbon price mechanism and operation other and parties in the global leadership of leverage of considering strategy for using when I have no effective strategy formula will have to find out strategy without coercion fails and ruins that kind of leadership. Mayor 22. I heard teachers and further considering investor aviation fuel efficiency theories members of the production of fuel burning emission version of implementation of the duty the other things involved there are these using investment in the right and optional emissions interplace for educating and generators via how to base and incentive and likely to use technological innovation I just now offset fuel purposes and purposes for improvement of aircraft and the excess efficient comprehensive instruments and the release of aviation against automatic aviation measure and the American USCTS and considering increase in light ticket price to only 0.9%. Failure to resolve aviation emissions fails over to credibility. Alright, 14. I heard been instructed to evidence and available to aircraft and regard outcome leadership and governance and direction and organizations around and the opportunity to have with all airplanes for the use of the national government and vastly energy and these are developed in question of lack of window and the relevancy credibility organization shall generate revenue and visions and revenue parties with the help of the American air transport. I got legitimacy skill orbital space management. Call 19. I got familiar with psychological political space traffic management and national unity outside construction of electrical visual and capital of the same conversation like the university system outside cost of article play and offshore such as space planes and over the airspace and people over the commercial planes and people with the convention even when areas of the commercial and tech access of local communities and auditive safety security office report, essentially the ocean environment report, each country environment to provide airside and navigation service, and the proposals for the outcome of social collaboration in the industry. That's key space and marine navigation requirements are 3. Space navigation to allow safety security and airside and space options consist of on-site and normal safety of pollution and breathing due to loss of high orbital transportation of the direct and satellite survey, and the first and work for the maneuver, the estimate maneuver, and transportation communication, the data and information, every existential risk. Marathon 23. Collapse causes fast moving war. Neutron 14. That's the United States federal government should adopt a carbon penalty on the aviation sector, utilizing a price adjustment mechanism based on emission levels. Advantage 2 is SAS. Carbon pricing is key to stimulate demand, but subsidies fail to stimulate innovation and production. Power County 24. Price and cost of SAR boxes are not limited to eliminating the penalty change in emission fees during the automated and management fuel costs are dropping the rest of the quality of the government of the future under the price of demand fee and dropping the leader and dropping the value and intensive messages that are provided given substantial benefit given high insensitive central and some sort of carbon price of the enhanced CMC bill. Ethanol is the likelihood of the entry but inevitable EV transition otherwise profitability. Addison 24. Ethanol is in the ability to money and budget of the emissions of the regional regional increasing SEOs encouraging sustainable farming practices prevents industry cost frozen to the one. One million use of greater profit efficiency from the efficiency lowers cost of efficiency lowers cost of absolute intensive source of purpose and benefit profits of energy. Obviously, addressing some valuable market producers and environmental facility greater financial stability and market investment about smaller farm practices. Pricing to make production sustainable. John 24. Carbon to be profitable consumption sustainable water and population and rising consumption and population to run long-term and should be 0.75% every each unit resident international research and radical changes in the life and recruiting recovery from research and innovation and ideas for distribution while optimizing use domestic food shocks to the level of 17. Uses to move on to the negotiation of the possible consequences of options and incentives while trade demand and social use of the supply to reduce the satisfaction of rapid consumption shocks to prevent available food insecurity causes nuclear war. Carbs 2. Foods considered property damage to the major company property damage will go to the very centers levels of failure civil wars and reaching numbers that reach the high risk of severe public confidential air government failures continuing warly when even wars and environmental NCOs are crucial for air jobs but changing market incentives is key. Almond 22. You'll find a reasonable moment for speed and market to achieve the benefit of the duty to market responsibility to receive and as much as you know. The necessity of the service that you bring right to irritation of logistical government and regional measures and technical innovation more than energy densities and increasing the availability of aircraft fuel innovation suitable fuel and cost of significant and justify the investment that outreaches military one fuel tanks are unique threats. 22. Energy efficient motivation all traditional energy based on the political resupplying forces for military must be initially decided to be vulnerable to expansion attachment and diversity of renewable conflict for solution and reasons and diversity value energy and should deliver into board based pricing seat under the semantic operation of 17. As it is the control of air forces and when you prevent the testing aviation markets for the Pacific to basis of building and possibility air assistance adoption and shifted on fuel online and company aviation vaccines from the company airports everybody all airports in the air and all the people is subject to change use budget cycle and global children for airports and see some secure and assure others and it's going to be able to find whatever you feel available and superiority self-substitution. Berkeley 24. Because in the question of which China and the Pacific, Russia, Ukraine, Iraq, and the region of regional war ideas and destabilizing region and first management of the air security, essential condition for any operation of the delivery and the operation capability of right target system CC, and the resource from Ukraine with their sunrise monetization and our versus security or even about the and effective aggression across China, Russia, Pacific, and challenges essential as ensure air superiority. Certainty is key for every advantage block. 24. Policies that are related to posting and demonstrating decarbonization plays long lasting access purchases to sales and investment confidence and domestic income rights for less than saving and for aviation services and yields and market rewards lower declines in production costs.
You good?
I'm gonna get water.
Yeah, you're good.
Alright.
Cool. Want to start with the plan, the price, what emissions are subject? Is it domestic airlines, all airlines, commercial, more than commercial?
The half-seat evidence said it would be determined just like by emissions, but we've read evidence before that. The Overton evidence says that
Just
emissions
determine.
from airlines are concentrated in the US, so it would just be
Yeah,
like domestic.
I get that you've read like internal links about airline emissions. I guess I'm confused. Which emissions from airlines and which airlines are subject? So like say like Air Canada, are they subject to the price by the US?
So the question is about like
Yes, international versus domestic, commercial versus military.
So the
That's the question.
FAA which I believe is the Milligan evidence outlines this. The FAA currently regulates like policies related to airline regulations and says that the tax would be able to be applied to, like, they can't tax in like planes coming in from Canada,
that answers
but
my
like
question.
any fueling that happens like in a domestic
I want to move
airport.
on to the impact at the bottom of Advantage 1, the ICAO and legitimacy card. This call evidence is like a idea that the ICAO could adopt and never says anything about aviation emissions. Where do you think you've read an internal link that aviation pricing results in them adopting low orbit space development?
Yeah, the card right above that, the Aberrati evidence, is specific to regulating aviation emissions, and then the card above that, the Meyer evidence, gives examples of when the U.S. was able to set fuel standards in the past for ICAO, and says
I am still missing the internal link here between aviation emissions and leadership on that front to that. You have read a solvency advocate that says that they should do this.
Examples of, like, in terms of just leadership and governance for ICAO broadly,
Where,
regulating aviation emissions
let's
would be key.
move back down to the
It
call
also gives
evidence
broad
then.
examples of
Where does it say
climate action.
leadership over emissions in aviation would result in the adoption of low orbit solar technology?
The internal link is the Aberrati evidence says that regulating like airplanes, emissions, and like climate action through that is key to restore its relevancy and credibility broadly, which is connected to the evidence that says that.
I disagree, but Advantage 2, I want to go to the air superiority impact. You have shrunk some text that I wish everyone should go unshrink. It says, quote, we need F-35s and B-21s, unmanned crews, and a ton of more things to modernize our military. Why do SAFs overwhelm those impediments?
This could be true. These are just different planes that we will always need new things for, but we've read, again, specific other cards that says that the issue of refueling is what is really bad in our air power right now, and that our inability to literally like refuel our planes abroad is what sends a signal to countries like China and Russia that any like the F-35s and other types of planes are inoperable.
I get your internal links. You have read a card that says that this is the reason why air power is bad. I am confused because evidence is that those internal links overwhelm other things.
It says that that is a reason as well. It also says that the issue of fuel is really bad. The app solves that.
Okay. It's been sent. The order is 6 off, then the advantage is in order, which I believe is Biosphere, then SAFs.
6, you said?
Yep.
I'm downloading
I'm gonna see.
Okay. Does everybody have it? Is everyone good? Okay. Perfect. First off, T subsets decarbonization requires emissions reduction across all sectors. They find the crucial 19 decarbonization really corresponds to requiring substitution of fuels regardless of which a sector of the economy's use has been associated with it. NDIs or economy-wide Henry 9 NDIs address market distortions, market-based emissions, or economy-wide voter for limits to ground and the subsets on top of all NDI mechanisms spread the negative research burden too thin. Integrate the topic in a vicious cycle of tiny asset backlog coverage. Next topic is the course kind of plan. The United States Federal Judiciary will hold that if the environmental sanity doctrine imposes a carbon penalty on the aviation sector, utilizing the price-based adjustment mechanism based on emission level. That solves via transit market-based emissions reduction into injunction relief. Correlate 21 the judiciary. It can transit emissions reduction market policies into interest with the argument that outcome trading tax in the judiciary or something needs direction or remedies when there was right, there was remedy injector direction for defender direction or like placing tax emission limited to limits emission in with the environmental standing encouraged courts to issue permanent injunction to native environment satisfying injury and adequate remedy environmental standing separate equities warranted because healthy environmental standing human right injunction to reduce emissions to which one a defense from emitting to a tax base in their able output. Next up is the tax cuts decided 119 Congress should abandon federal clean energy policy in this budget program data unblock CCG extensions by repealing the I rate less than 327 repealing I rate energy subsidiation with like a permanent approach to growth. A tax cuts I rate is less than 4.7 $4.7 trillion. These credits can offset permanent extension of the TCJ without any budget rules repealing the average credits and more, and then offset the revenue loss. Only such an enemy keeps tax cuts on track for planned permutation, violate the House Freedom Caucus' clear red line of no clean energy, TFE 322. And freedom, a caucus members short red lines and clash over Trump's big bill, and HTT members are warning that Trump's agenda must got green energy failed to get a parallel. And the final bill is passed in the House of Green Energy. Trump would have to eliminate Republican services. You're not going to get a tax bill through. And the House is passing inflation, we should repeal every dollar of oil. And so Trump has asked Republicans to enact sweeping tax priorities, which can include a permanent extension of the House Green Energy, which takes Trump's agenda of tax rates and permanent tax cuts are key to space colonization. Winning in 24-1 policy, it can affect commercial space tax rates of Congress. Over the past tax increasing commercial space companies will not have money able to build rocket ships and literally as asset defense of the commercial space to follow launch companies lower that cost of launching it over the administration institute to tax increase have figures so about space by commercial space companies that cannot have both a global limits possibility to buy space or global that out tax fairness. Multiplanetary colonization prevents extinction. Writer 21 becoming multiplanetary tax. The human race wants extinction becoming extinct. The century long term risk or existential asteroids, volcanic eruption, cellular explosion, even greater risk of nuclear war. All of us killed at one by subject small outputs and risk of being destroyed significant cartels certainly. Classes that anticipated existential danger or diverse effect is most effective mitigation strategy. Next up is the signing statements counterplanning Congress. Should unanimously pass legislation that adopts a carbon penalty on the aviation sector utilizing a price adjustment mechanism based on emission levels. The president should append a signing statement declaring that adopting a carbon penalty on the aviation sector utilizing the price adjustment mechanism based on emission levels in the United States is unconstitutional and unenforceable. Congress should defer a cause of action to the president for the statute void ab initio. It competes and solves. Signing statements nullify the law and making the counterplan the opposite of the plan in imploding separation of powers. Congressional assertion invalidates the statement and reinstating the statute. Page 22, executive pursuing power in part evidence by the signing statement independent. It disregard the law favor discretion not a single word. It tells authority dependence no kind of key. Two choices either sign a veto along out of veto is not an option. Academic court England versus New York the extra constitutional. The statements handicaps of also by empirical congressional logic of Congress. That's not nothing to write as statements and sponsor media and thus find will escape acknowledge. Signing statements cause extinction. Page 22, signing statement nullifies statute limit. War powers both statement has said he acts without authority use words and accidentally appeals without once receiving authority to banner both take actions to give with health cards currently raises securities but presidential misconduct accurate and presidential military action. Any more scrutiny than spectrum any boards is not just by war powers of emergency requires action to use supports and request for spectrum review of deliberation for less than 3 days of investigating and very thrust exceed expectations. Next up is aeromasculinity critique. Sustainable aviation fuels for technical solutionless logic that pushes responsibility off of airlines. Hopkins et al. In 23. Sustainable aviation justified by airlines. And Terrorist discourse of formations testing is a technical organizational sustainable sustainability connection narratives and discourse that with the core piece of sustainable aviation very similar. However, frequently noted liberation high council call for government systems that say change responsibility to compensation of the actions depends a couple of additional logic as SAF the Southern Department of Business and allowing corporation to continue high mobility while permitting responsibility to newness. Another organizational strategy is something plans that are good for efficiency by the year of New York aircraft along air mobile future for 30 years and airlines says that the overall amount of emissions and absolute terms are that are shaping responsibility to governments that work customers. That creates hegemonic aeromasculinity that drive it as to continue violent market systems propped up by the status quo airline industry makes gendered violence inevitable. Hopkins et al. 23 nexus of gender and environmental modernization planning economic growth and sustainable visibility visible equal masculinity is every recognition as well supporting Kentucky conservative competition position that provides a solution traditional demand of hegemonic masculinity as a competence in market reflecting hegemonic aeromasculinities. Vote negative analyze aeromobilities through the lens of aeromasculinities. Hopkins et al. 23 theorizing aeromobilities or aeromasculinities are with understanding of the problem facing a fallacy of sustainable aviation for close bottom rational perpetuating gender classes and racialized mobilities and affordance since 95% of airlines was male resisting aeromasculinities and not about adding weapon of challenging heteronormative white masculinities for ecological masculinity and action a collaborative relation with a non-human which is carrying help them repairing sustainable aviation which undermines system person and offers alternative critication of low flying movements. Next off the states counterplan the 50 US states and relevant subnational entities should adopt a carbon penalty on the aviation sector utilizing the price adjustment mechanism based on emission levels via compact. State climate policy solves the case solved in 20 states and measures to reduce emissions are as efficiently upon emissions to challenge conventional understand that the value of a action to reach from provider use may be much greater than realistic principle of subnational and leaders was embedded in Paris the US system develops and numerous authorities of national actions to state policy to plan nature with the potential for driving national emission production either while and national climate policies that worse standard states have significant authority of energy and transportation. Opinions 1. Trump comes tactical working mitigation worse than 25 times. Aggressive versus balance agenda only to be returned to come back using a radio withdrawal. For comparison, creation of the world using renewable energy, relax method will be the rules that are coming from cold and rain. Revive actually requiring all the matter adjustments. Warming impacts is empiric and not by the geological right towards 23. Take this active reason to expect climate change to bring about catastrophe and gives a good reason to expect a warmer the PE temperature 7 degrees above the PE temp did not even advance extinction to temps throughout the horizon seen dropping warm move where this was 70 year about every nice source. As the trans 10 degrees warmer occurred over 6 years just gives about evidence surviving temperatures and how the worst season in areas in the Holocene even the starting cities with the humans with technical warning can survive. Super adaptation now solves the impact ground 24 adaptation made fusion. A successor reviews over the universally high real time reduction and malnutrition fans that acts upon increasing competence and diseases decrease more health reducing heat of decline as far as a test from disaster combination of return even faster study overwhelmingly shows super adaptation empirically evident declining global the decline disaster show declining tests and damage yields and benefit from varieties and thermogenetic modified percent without resistance to passive disease and adverse and whether fertilizer irrigation mechanization of these overwhelmed any negative impact of these integration of adaptation based on public and adverse attention from repeatable success. Climate wars are debunked by large data sets corporations more likely 1 to 23. It is outrageous to assume hotter weather makes people aggressive water wars and it won't happen. Problems can be catalysts or co-op problem lips and needs and studies spatial rational ways of dealing with serious and every end water wars have been broken out for 25 years. Problems in no house efforts working together they face a common environmental threat. No impact ozones recovering red short fast either 24 nada. Along ago depletion of ozone seems insurmountable but been about humidity to protect the humidity to protect the ozone from harnessing inside you know all of the entire the entities venturing from the things modeling on of the ozone depleting substance and piece out include reduction of releasing of CC ozone improvement. Seawater pH self-corrects and marine life is resilient all their 19 alarm. It claims their bases companies benefit the ocean makes the ocean become less alkaline and never has its pH of zero can be very low pH varies regionally is seasonally seen after regions 9-7 marine life developed with CO2 levels many times higher than today alkaline coral also a flourish of this pH that water can hold more CO2 than what was warm water uses CO2 to ocean water and contains enough dissolved calcium to find all energetic stage without affecting pH alkaline levels increase not decrease carbon dioxide effects of world leaves arriving at pH levels of well below lumber projection Henry's itself database calcification and instead of AC water iota our resistance leader for absorbing the with the reef of plants and animals because of the limestone which is not resolved the ranking is 10 times higher than today. No card says that ICO can't implement low orbit space management or that the evidence given this is asserted and attacked with a warning. No evidence says that the US spills over and no to pre-cascade FAM 17 casters talk about the orbital area can be broken up into more regions. LBO things would go with a high orbital chunk orbits that are mid orbits as EGP and assassin. Air volumes of region numbers of feet of the region where EGP all the assassin removing it seems to be also only one satellite for 1,000 kilometers is not a problem of passion where it's also hitting our tiny less than 110,000 we don't lose actually we realize a lot of factors make castle less of a problem of trees whatever. A volume of single sources making pollution of where the magnitude loss like the most having solar fallacy no data and makes it to orbit motion in terms of all objects to orbit and of larger objects and these tracking important constellations are and all new launches that include a planet and the 2G orbit and finish shoot. American experts are rather than little hunger meter 16 America. A top 20 customers all high development within Canada also 1100 within 1900 US experts was 1 1 having 1% of the richest group to receive 150 times the watching part of the with it. And 4 countries experts with 100 experts and 8 are the and from the US government the income special amount of the knowledge of countries total and food supplies. No food crisis SC 24 market forces provided and the food security is just valuation more than this due to agency providing poverty when they have plans and supply reducing trucks this better to value storage facilities infrastructure and transport links a sector demonstrated remarkable flexibility there is no indication the market is not vulnerable the market is the most effective instrument for climate adaptation. Food insecurity testing caused more fast eating. There was little merit in the notion. And then reduction access to food, increasing confidence requires people and having the means that will people on the reconciliation, not the position or work of assets merit as it may have to use the social and so these issues for discourse and tasting more complex with social and corruption. As desire for performance and academic problems. There's a list of all causes to Air Force 20 for key 24 modernization civil includes flying more F-30 cabin V-21 development building on top of uncreated collaborative combat aircraft building action aerodynamics investing and modification basing product of violation shortfalls of a short changing operation accounts of so personnel are adequately a change biofuels can't solve fossil dependence nor enhance military capabilities how 75 the evidence affirmative fuels and mitigated petroleum dependency and just by substantial investment in privacy and not enhancing the other words use dependency to return to benefit for the EU or NASA reduction and not provided a benefit most depend on all also would increase the chance in regards to the income petrol and 5 use of liquid to occupy the same volume and must be transferred to point of the use 5 use and whether or renewable energy that has been not provided energy that is zero there was no business work on the comments no and no less time fundamental issues were coming to the tether remains obsolete. Drones make the Air Force obsolete bar in 24 the Air Force case and existential threats on the integrity making positive for replace drones have requested addressing the air away the drone revolution means it may well be possible to the service regime air security Ukraine dramatically accelerate the military use of drones. Barno 24 is marked at military use of drones, which is about halfway through.
Did you say?
No, I was.
Okay, I thought I heard you say Frank.
No, cool.
Good stuff. Status of the offer.
Conditional status quo is always an option.
Were there any reasons to reject the T?
No.
Cool. T, the crucial evidence at the top says which sector of the economy its use has been traditionally associated with. I'm kind of confused here. What does it mean to be like traditionally associated? Does that mean it has to still be within that sector that it's traditionally associated with?
The crucial evidence says that it must be truly horizontal and affect all sectors regardless of which portion of the economy it is.
You're like missing the line right before where it says, quote, regardless of
Well,
which
sure,
sector.
but I was, okay, you down-highlighted that part. The court's counterplan, the counterplan text has the courts hold that it would compel the plan. What's the next step to actually implementing it? Do the courts do it themselves? Does it pass off to like?
Yeah, the court holds that the price is the form of injunctive relief that climate plaintiffs can receive as a result of suing
So
firms.
the
and
solvency
firms.
mechanism of the counterplan, would that then be that individual plaintiffs then have to sue the aviation sector to receive that price as injunctive relief?
Yes, that is part of it. We will also read obviously more cards that say things like deterrence effects, etc. But yes, climate suits is the.
All right, which piece of evidence do you think says that as a result of this for the aviation sector, there would be enough plaintiffs to sue for this, pursue cases on their own, have
I think the
resources to
Gorlick
follow
evidence.
through with that?
I think the Gorlick evidence is fantastic in that it lowers the barrier to entry for plaintiffs sufficiently by turning the AFF's market-based instrument into a form of injunctive relief.
This also, the Gorlick evidence also says without a cap and trade or carbon taxing system, then the judiciary needs to act. Why doesn't the perm solve that?
The argument is that the judiciary needs to act because there's not a carbon tax.
Sure,
The
and then the
judiciary
act does
acts
one.
independently of a carbon tax and creates injunctive relief.
Yeah, and it says the necessity comes out of not having a
The
plan.
permutation would
tax
link to the
cuts-
disact.
Yeah.
Sure. The tax cuts disad, the Whittington evidence says that tax cuts are key to give space companies money. Where do you think this evidence says that that funding would be enough for them to develop the necessary technology?
I think the
for
evidence is
space now?
very good. The very bottom sentence of the card says either the world will enjoy limitless possibilities fueled by space, or it will forego that out of tax fairness.
Sure.
I think the evidence
But
is pretty
I feel like that's a
explicit that
pretty
says that
good,
there's a double
ending
bind.
to an
The
article.
tax cuts-
Why do you think this outlines that they have the technological ability now to send all these lunar landers?
The
and
argument
rockets
is not that
to
they
space
necessarily
and
have the
colonies?
technical capabilities now, but
Alright,
that tax
so-
cuts are key to
So that's my
innovation and
question. They get the
manufacturing.
money now, how long does it take to do all these trial runs and innovation that gets to space
about
all
getting
in time for what I'm gonna
continued
say will
funding.
explain a short-term impact?
It's about getting continued funding and money. If we massively increase taxes at the end of 2025, all of these space companies will no longer have the amount of capital in order to invest in the technologies
That's my
necessary.
question.
It's a linear thing of developing technologies over the course of the next decades to get us off the rock.
How much time is it?
7:21.
Then courts, states, signing statements, decay, and then politics. Alright, just ignore the top of this, the card at the top of this.
I can't.
Is anyone not good? No circumvention, durable fiat range is good faith implementation of the plan. Anything else means absolute under the Trump admin. Solves durable fiat rate escalator mechanism. The aviation does cause warning which the fits all. One is high altitude accelerates hot housing, that's the out2. Chemical processes growth rates and supersonic aircraft to estimate the biosphere that's leading 3 circus. Clouds accelerated infrared trapping the impacts is understated that. Over 10, but markets that way Trump late 24 most renewable commitments are renewable conditions so higher. Payments and funds are going to red states which and provide work if Trump is reelected because funding on projects allowed in registers Republican government centers are going to be reluctant to end those programs like that. To the politics, yes, extinction implemented by science, tipping points, flock of feedback loops, cause nuclear war, disease, state cops, payment model, underestimation on risk, that's bad, adaptation is wrong, bad. 25 client models are best one unknown, millennial relation, cars, result, services, clouds, including open average air cover, site sheets, department source, without reinforcing feedback, human center, disorders, non-linear painter card models, not capture non-linear seasons are, either previous centuries, house, and models, projected market card, not projected climate, worse, not some compounding crises impacted above, no. Yes, ozone depletion causes extinction, radiation through the stratosphere, empirically triggers ecological collapse, which ends life on Earth, that's Gibbons, and they say it's improving now, ozone improvement does not assume future uptake in the airline demand, and under reporting of aviation emission, yes, extinction, acid rain, deplete the ocean, oxygen, kills all the marine life, keystone species, net zero survival of the planet does not violate ICAO, conceded the 1AC evidence that Gorsia fails, and the status quo, and the evidence that they said does not take that it violates, it says that they have committed to not tax twice, but the minor evidence says that Gorsia and the quo it fails, which means that it won't actually resolve anything, and it ruins ICAO leadership now, which the plan is able to fill in for. Yes, extinction, ICAO is key. One he calls as only legitimacy solves low orbital management. The MRSA evidence is our internal link that the tax generates revenue, which boosted, yes, work on extinction, losses to military miscalculate preemptive strikes. That's the devotion of evidence, SAF. EV transition might be inevitable, but it's not fast enough for uptake. Even if Trump rolled it back, the tax still stimulates demand. That's the conceded Karakani evidence. The SAF turn case is a TA warming turns every environment to impact the SAF solve food wars and Air Force 2 is alternatives oil production turns out their offense 3 qualifications. Oil industry has vested interest in anti-biofuel companionship. Presumably evidence bought out 4 non-unique sex 24 EV and active in EIS active 07 ethanol production once RFS before consumption less than 4 billion following increase over 4 billion ethanol production now. Use 30% of corn. You classify all of this to the K to prove that SAF production is not that bad. SAFs are good. One key turns farm profitability towards climate smart practices and taxation solves 30 SAFs that's frozen in 2. Regenerative active life cycle emissions added in 24 benefit because regenerative active tools on farming sustainability, seeing artificial impacts, practices, and reducing emissions which this life cycle emissions ATJSF can be positive soil sequestration, increase by improving soil health, reducing equipment, fertilizer, help to reduce number 2 and 3. Next studies are outdated, track 23, spots of subsidies, hydrogen, and environmental point studies for protect your modern term economy, use natural gas instead of coal plants, better efficiency, new share plants, massaging one, only 7 years global biofuels, opportunities to sustain economic growth, new investments, capacity, increase yield, and reduce yield for fueling gas, food wars, because it's key for global exports, collapse, imperially causing conflict, collapses, government which goes nuclear, that's crib, yes, air power, positive extinction, air power is key for rapid victory, deterrent, failure to modernize, unmatched credibility, ignites every hotspot, that's the Berkeley evidence, no all causes the FAA's modernization by creating better fuel for all these new aircraft outwards, SAF send us a sufficient signal to other countries that are air power sustainable, SAF is key, the next part is about biofuels, our evidence post statements that the DoD is looking to adopt no drones, it's about use by Ukraine, not the US, does not talk about signaling to China and Russia, which air power is key to. We meet the after the economy-wide in the aviation sector, concedes decarbonization process to limit warming to 2 degrees, or it must be global, no math means cows green bushel, energy decarbonization are action policies are full green and hold temperature well below 2 degrees, decarbonization of the process, energy transition up to high complexity around the globe, the SAF sector specific SEs, 16 and then medium pledges system and matter across regions sectors, medium decarbonization of the process, Cambridge, NDT process, stopping reducing carbon gas release in the process of the process, decarbonization means less carbon granted, 24, the awards policies, charges and the other policymakers and income changes involved in that reduction quantities releases, result of reduction or offsetting, means within B21, the conversation of in limits within, applies that policy, special relation population present and close to town limits as room 4, room 2, tended to further impeach things to report self 4, tended to further forward, doing further preferred flash creativity on possible non-restrictive limits, one-sided innovation yields fairness, B, functional limits best, then talking about NEG context, politics, renewable data process, or case, C, pigs, no limit base, zero solvency deficits, attributes, net weight, C, reasonability, offense, even bad, incentive, cheap shots, that kind of considered debate scores. Agent counterplans are voting issues, sealing entirely for one AC, render public education relevant, or exposed research firms, there are hundreds of agents, permutation, do both, align Congress and the courts to the counterplan, United States federal government includes subsidies, Chicago 13 government, national line, no one refers to the US federal government, just government, which has bodies to the plan and the counterplan over another issue, counterplan must be textually and functionally competitive forces, to maintain the counterplan, dash artificial that benefits encouragement, case rating, cause negative ratio, will defend the normal vote, a competition doesn't solve, Congress says no bomb, 18 Congress of court decision of implementation, acting against interest into which statute, Congress over by an statute, Congress reverse, no decision of the law, court invites Congress to override the decision, they misinterpreted 2 taxation, congressional authority, Constitution 101.3, circumvention, bomb, 18 implementations for courts and next, no jurisdiction over average non-compliance, which court prompts follow the next section, for several condition administrators, feel less an obligation to follow it, go to states. 50 state fiat is voting issue, not real world, not no solvency deficits, non-conform fiat solves, permanent vote, shield, politicians can direct claims to the state's permutation to the counterplan. It links that benefit, it would be a precedent, everyone would have to weigh in, does not solve 188, Mr. Bro. 24, they were preempted by the ADA, especially when 56 from regulations, they don't have the impact of law related in the area period. The first concluded ADA is one broad, the state has a connection, there's no way to avoid preemption, the court's only an ADA preempted unit of laws only to indirect 2 FAA billing and 20 given instances with its option airspace, unchoice, the single purpose was that enjoy single authority rules for airspace as not expanded FAAs, responsible for many aspects of aviation, overseas environmental programs, 3, Trump, Ryan, 21 increasing for judicial preemptions, place state local average PMs, claims, single preemption, customary use legislative regulation, based on federal choice, preemptive power, one institutional legal where we center setting partner, federal regulation language that expressly preempts state local rules, persuade, or define law preempts and fields entire obstacles to the goal of the entire rule. 4 is the CEA, Zhang, and Ruther, Zhang and Ruther 421, states-based legal challenges, CEA preempts states from adopting standards relying fed for meaningful regulations to regional international relations, makes not challenging domestic flights or interstate interest of 3% of states, usually 5 regular emissions would only cover a small fraction of US emissions, 5 modeling, actually not going to read that, go to time statements. Permutation to both to the counterplan to the plan as a result of the counterplan, no word in the plan is immediate to the plan of the counterplan over another issue explained on the course counterplan text inserted, reject policy counterplans, they seal the after encourage backfile, recycling, fields, friends, and clash conditionality. This voting issue doesn't allow straight transfer from contradictory arguments, every counterplan, no risk option, text research notes we see, will time is walking and able to get this, so solves, doesn't solve one time frame, 2 points are not later and invisible every moment of delay, increase the risk, that's Brad, the CP's delayed, and Jacob, and study showed lack of any new case region, Supreme Court, 5 years, 2 certainty block, 24, read that in the 1AC, 3 signaling, confusing process, 2 ICAL legitimacy, 4 legal force, 4 judicial review, CUNY, 7 times using legal force, only question suffer common made no judicial review action already subject to judicial review. There's no unmade just over to the Congress effective while continuing by the president respect preference in that action second constitutional law, non-judicial nature, SOP 5 court say no and out. No internal one reject for laundry list, 1 AR gets the answers to the block, 2 spill over, 1 instance and solve it, 3 war power solving 6 review, 7400 John Drake, 1 all the high state range, which is action, Congress, largely really structural peerless ball, the seal of word play, you got the English electric, general straightforward, road nation, executive, need, facility, delivery, and consider, presidency, president, control, security, become criteria, and nation, top liberation, now is the time to hit. Framework negligence through opportunity, cost requires competitive alternatives and unique ideas as links to advantages versus K, fairness, cost for debate the game engagement, shapes education, tech and theory, private actors are illogical opportunity model, cost of public action, utopian nature, moves 1AC, kills fairness, vagueness, kills in-depth analysis, all reasons direct the team, loading picks, voting issue, without offense, opportunity testing, deters research and use fairness, permutation, do both to the F and the alt and all other instances, per contrast by severance, double mind, all, solve the loops or overcome the status quo, permutation to the alt and the F, solve severance proves fairness, severance proves fairness, no, can you write me up a rep, so much no link uniqueness, SAFs exist now, but the opportunity to make them competitive, that was everything. I did in the key speech about how SAFs are net better than the status quo, but there's no impact to securitization, Keating, 13 rival sums are in the United States, case commons where we may not, we can have research to commons where we have created one form of 100 members rates, level increasing unpredictable weather, just hearing about the damage, just hearing about the dangerous global like global warming, making sure to pass space to common theory, dangerous limits of climate change, can lead to global cooperation, we think yourself facing shared energy, people together, war, transgender violence, but analysis enough isn't enough, only material engagement, solvement, challenge 18, effective feminist ending, to acknowledge existing structures, political basic interest systems of war trade, proliferation, use of weapons, facilitate gender violence, civil women, disproportionately suffer from, use of weapons in public duty, slavery, sexual violence, shopping, lack of access to the proper system, more impactful approach, to use based on challenging most sources and that frame, opportunity, energy, is utilized and feminist, policies not being exposed in women's teams during conflict, but also preventing conflict itself, controlling weapons and living options, important to the process of inclusive discipline and anticipation policy, public preemption to disarmament, reps such a reality framework proves that's a bad model, but specific when you see evidence proves that SAFs will only be used for refueling claims, not for any justifications or evidence jumbo or cell that has no terminal. Go to the politics seat. Firm to the AFF and repeal the IRA per their solvency advocate at the top. It doesn't take out the AFF. It's a new energy policy, and the card I read on case proves that Republicans like the IRA and the spoils, so they don't actually want to repeal it. The budget isn't as bulletin. 417 Republicans facing crunch time, budget divided over. Everything that's in what they could have had a ruling from the state of Jonathan. One of the budget this week, there's still new cars, everything ready. Then clear not support plus Medicaid, capacity of time, very great questions about special surgery. They sent out actual problems support running saloons, there's little tune private Johnson time, what's under the city's also maybe. Then Republicans that have some actually into the deficit forcing them to sunset provisions. Plan is popular. Martin 24 Republicans Democrats will include provisions which SAF, the few Republicans declare SAFs eligible and guarantees and language on the Muslim and Black foreign language, known diverse and other common programs. Take 2 is TA and popular offset, 1 achieve global goals, opposition higher rate, impact total emissions, benchmark energy, low import adjustments, thus always specifying increased fiat, solves media without controversy, anything else justifies circumvention and riders, agency action shield, stroke 17 coverage, labor agency research uses project stands for the delegation chip and found that it can legitimately see the who that direct action mark that card at action DA is not intrinsic logical policymaker can be the plan in the DA key to find the best policy option, no extinction impact space, welcome solve so good, 19 page that's when there's one connection which would lead to extinction require related their role space, but not to scope the currently concurrent space, when cope with Ashwater, some of these are only lifespan of generations, the rationale could be the 7 next 1 years with this, the next space to its own risk is action rather than human humans transfer air, one way, but then space challenge is survival on long-term scale.
Is that the question? Yeah. Okay. Good for Gus. Show and thread on the disad was marked at action, right?
Congress was marked at legislators make the agency the who that took action.
Theoretical reason to reject the team were Asian counterplan states, process, condo, floating pics.
Vague alts,
Vague
private
alts.
actors, and utility.
Okay. And those last are on K. The blank part on case, why do you think this is responsive to politics?
Because you have said, like, your competition argument for the politics TA was that the IRA is unpopular, Republicans want to remove it now. We have made an argument that the IRA is popular, 80% are going to red states, Republicans like it boosts their manufacturing, stuff like that, which means they would not want to repeal the IRA.
Okay. What card do you think says the plan is popular in the context of the House Freedom Caucus?
I mean, the Martin evidence talks about how SAS broadly are popular. It's the ethanol lobby, which is a broad share of of congressional Republicans. We've read a lot of 1AC evidence about how the Adamson evidence and the Rosen evidence about how the ethanol industry is collapsing in the status quo. It's inevitably going to collapse, but the plan revitalizes that, which Republican senators love because the ethanol lobby has this massive share in Congress, and the plan is able to.
Same question. What House Freedom Caucus member supports green energy tax cuts, or not?
I mean, I don't know
ERA,
specific members, but we do have evidence that the ethanol lobby is a substantial part of the House and the Senate, and they have a massive sway over.
Advantage one. I'm still very confused about this scenario. Why does a U.S. tax bolster ICAO credibility? Your argument is like ICAO has no credibility; they're unable to do anything. Why does a U.S. tax show that ICAO can do things?
Because the Abernathy evidence says that resolving aviation emissions writ large, which the Affirmative is able to do, is able to restore credibility to ICAO. Because it looks like because the bottom of the card says that the taxation generates revenues and is able to deter emissions, which restores credibility to ICAO.
Why does that restore credibility to ICAO? The card is like 90% reasons ICAO is failing in the status quo.
Because it says ICAO has been dealing with airplanes for 16 years. It's promised climate action for the past 20 years. It's failed to deliver, costing the industry billions.
The app is not ICAO, correct?
Yeah, correct. We don't know. ICAO is not our actor. But our argument is that resolving aviation emissions restores ICAO legitimacy.
Why does that spill over to low orbit regulations?
That's the Hall evidence. That is like
What's the warrant in that card? I see the tag. I don't see the warrant.
Yeah, ICAO is key to space planes who have to navigate airspace to reach low orbit.
Okay. The court's counterplan, perm other issues. What does this solve? Anything?
Well, in case you make an term of benefit in the block, then it's preempted for that.
Okay. The politics disad, you made 2 theoretical reasons for no link. I got the second one that was like, whatever. What was the first one?
Sorry, what do you mean?
You were like, no link, no politics disads.
You got solved? Or
Okay.
is that?
And the fiat solves was the one I got.
I.
Oh, no, that was the one I missed. I mean,
Oh, okay.
7:35. I'm sending it down. 5. Okay, sent. Order is before the docs. That's accepted. Court's counterplan. State's counterplan. Signing statements counterplan. Arrow masculinity critique. The biosphere advantage. The SAF's advantage. Does anyone need that again?
I do.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, I'm downloading.
You're good. I'll wait till, let me know you download it. I'll do it again. You're good right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just downloading.
You're good. Okay. Let me know when everyone has it downloaded, and then I'll give the order.
Oh, you can redo the order. I'm sorry. I think we're gonna start the speech.
No, sorry. Courts, states, signing statements, the critique, biosphere advantage, SAF's advantage. Okay. Berkeley, all y'all vote good.
Courts, states, signing statements, K, 1, 2.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. Judges all good. Perfect. The counterfeit solves the after influence attacks on airline emissions in the form of injunctive relief for violations that will right to a safe and healthy environment that lowers the bar for sending to the floor unless plaintiffs have sued firms in order to receive the after the IRS relief that score like use. Submissions favor risk of net benefit addressing outweighs a risk of any deficit. Judge take the counterplay vote on the net benefit alone if they win enough their permutation. Simply a defensive test competition. Agent counterplays are good. We should get the counterplays and test the after agent keywords. Prefer one ground each competition. Keep us in the game versus subseason subsets. Restriction on other generics. Their absence causes comparative lewis counterplays that consult to fill in. Second competition should determine legitimacy. Don't protect counterplays on theory alone. If the counterplay competitive, then you should evaluate. Normally, it's for the permutation to do the counterplay apply here, which I'll do in a second. Each advantage sets solve their offense, judicial power, executive power, sets are easy to cut shit on offense versus even the most egregious counterplays. Permutation do both, leads to policy weapons. Trump's legislative agenda, killing tax cuts, combination cannot overcome backlash because Trump will push it through inside to help study the HFC. The counterplay low to lawyers' politics. The HFC would direct anger at the court, not Johnson or link. This uber specific to congressional clean energy, which is intrinsically tied to the sense of tax cuts. That's TFP. Second, the assisted legislation, 0 standing Flynn. 13, federal laws. Displays common law claims that the Trump because of the Milwaukee 1 and 2 on the Congress and acting water language. No, common laws displays on the Congress. Speak directly on this within require clear and effects purpose. The as was satisfied causation denied seen in June. 21 diffuse impact satisfied causation on the cases of fairly regulated emissions of court causation on the holiday challenge. Nothing were challenged. The mission being fully disputed. Regarding on the whether policies were a citation of action. Permutation due to counterplan severs, which is a vote over classification. 1 adopt policy. It's only Congress cross. 2 Congress has a policy on issue to investigate its powers adopt following by contrast is likely to give the agenda constitutional jurisdiction because cannot adopt policy. 2 adopt requires legislation better. 7 to adopt means to protect the environment. The court on the power adopt against someone with an act of the behind the mailing between laws compels them. They do the act legislation to interpret language as not executing enforcing laws with judge. The language of all reasonable amendment. The court agrees 11. 9 the court to define adoption in the context of national municipal legislative body on the regulation or budget is adopted when the body votes to accept it. 3 policy it's not paid in the court scope. 6 policy means of legislative body in the statutory language and not named by agency or court after statutory interpretation. 4 resolved as legislative instrument LHR. No date of resolution and legislative interest to use for policies on the use of the term resolved. We only need when one term introduced in term of the legislation controls the surrounding tax preferred first version of the limits within debate tax in Congress. He is the only national predator against us. Like ethanol fusion of data center, second ground age competition keeps us in the game versus subsidies. Subsidies that turn other generics or absence causes comparatively worse counterplans that consult to fill. And 3rd, education only our counterplan facilitates comparative institutional analysis of who ought to do the plan. 4th, mitigates often Congress key. The Congress key for signaling leadership authority fantastic check back and take abuse independently. These are resolutional mandates that you have to stop meet them. They on top of vote against jurisdiction. Ethan, could you open MQD and get the D means all card from permanent counterplan? Perm. Other issues linked to politics include a plan. This isn't a process counterplan. Congress says no. Does not apply. This is not courts force Congress to adopt the plan, but that the courts mirror the as perspectives as a form of injunctive relief. Paying tax doesn't apply. This is not judicial tax, but just applying the same calculations for finding injunctive relief for suits against airlines. But also this means that the cap has to be Congress because they said that only they can tax, which means that they can get permutation to the counterclaim because they functionally said it's that. D means all Supreme Court of Kentucky. 3 whether a section reports all is opposed to even the matter of question not the article the other is to be sounded on this article so I will lead. This is the function of the word and the group indicating the purpose as a whole and the group of whole and then you can see the entire body and then the 3 parts and components. That's US 15 needs all three branches. That's 3. 18 US 230 parts of Congress, executive and judicial. Send that out. Circumvention is wrong. 1, no circumvention. Counterpoint establishes a vital standing doctrine that allows that courts follow like gospel. B, it's not applicable to the counterpoint. The counterpoint establishes the mechanism as jumping with B for suits. The plaintiff is not forcing the dictator to act, which is what the counterpoint of the card is about. The C will conceive in case durable fiat solve circumvention. Means that all the actors comply with the counterpoint that way. The way they get to answer that on Trump, on the Trump stuff on case, the counter, or states. Concede the permutation, test competition, not going for it. Theories, reason, direct the argument, not the team, because we're not going for it, but it's good. And test the abstract keyboards, if they don't have one, they should probably lose. The signing statements, counterpoint, proceed. The permutation, test competition, process bad is reason, direct the argument, not going for it, but no link, it's not process counter, but an enforcement pick, you should have asked. Conditionality is good. 1, net flex, multiple angles. Level the playing field, the egg is always reaction to afterwards, preferably clarification. 2nd, innovation. 2 is the risk averse, fall, slash safety testing. 3rd, critical thinking for sufficient. Creative, tactful. 2 A's. 4th, logic, find the best policy options, creeping accuracy to make. The plan good, excuse inevitable speed, highlighting a dichotomy between our consolidation, solve it. 2, dispose bad, because 2 A's constrained plot. Good research about makes process on people. The critique. Concede the permutation test competition, not going for it. Theories, we're not going for the piece. So research the argument, not the team, not fully pegged because it does not result in the app. Should have asked in cross-sex. We did not feel also should have asked in cross-sex. Also not vague. You should have asked what amended cross-sex the advantage. Trump zeros who need to Trump massively thumbs war makes all Stevens they cut airline emissions. 1 cuts up Biden era projects because every Biden era project. 2nd, Paris withdrawal. Hebrews 2 repairs pretty. The climate neglect. 3, drill baby drill. He's serving production of federal public land. Production will hit all time high million. 24 power. Tucker renewable energy oil and gas at all time high. People should oil and if they're taking on the way in the air. There's like gas like Congress Trump. Solar world of reaction. This is the efficient of our expected to make conservative local court. They've answered the circumvention wrong. It's not circumvention. Our airlines don't contribute that. Other sources overwhelm solvency. Drop means that if you want a risk of all the other climate actions means that they could not resolve climate anyway. No impact of warming. Geological record disproves that humans survive rapid individual climate shocks in Greenland, the Swiss Alps, and American coast, and thrive during Holocene warm periods. Humans are not dispersed, rich, populous, mobile, and capable of adaptation, so better. Equipped in our ancestors as Thorstad disproves the risk of feedback loops because humans are smart and can all are mobile and able to get away from risks that happen. Adaptation zeros extinction from war, but humanity self-corrects to solve every threat. Every study goes neg. Higher crop yields, water variability, vaccines, etc. Cap the worst. The existential risk of warming that's brown. Models are irrelevant. We're still besting technology now, which means that capital is there quickly to adapt. Blind to new threats that means it's spread. It's irrelevant. This brown. Adaptation avoids the worst downside of risk for Kaiser. 23 comment. Expects to come back some of the figures later, high level power about. Study short of the worst case scenario, some of the human ingenuity, the ability to have markers are the best way to only build that power state climate change. Should not be under consideration of those sense. Bursting the policies that are policies that deliver a fractionally cool planet and improved. These segments are low lying cities pay for itself, the rich community becomes a greater ability to plan and adapt to. And accurately model the climate. No climate war, shared environmental stress, catalyzes cooperation and demand management. In these 2,500 years of history finds out a single scarcity-induced war. The claim is counterintuitive since war destroys the resources states are ready to access as Warner. Yes, assumes compounding risk because reaction states is always cooperation empirically. The institutions, Chad Crawford, 22 communities have instituted a mechanism to co-op and the reasons on certain to co-op on water and water. Normally, the mass majority of cases are resources shared and the help us work out. And be a treaty the Indians have been settled in our. There's another example on the Arctic Area Council. Can read the competition co-op as far cheaper than violent. Contestants are just as likely to pro peace, but the 18 contestants are made presenting peace rather than the one group around the common challenge of survival. The rebels have been too weakened by the disaster community are aware the disaster makes the conflict harder for our solution with 8 flows. This respect reflects expert consensus flows out. 20 experts found ranks the competition among those leads include factors driving conflict, the development, corruption. There's a tendency to offset a resource impact. Some of the study categorizes data water streets out of hundreds of wolf and did not find single sense of war. The no ozone impact is recovering. The Montreal Protocols capped 99% of substances for the permanent phase that's red for this overwhelms. It's not assumed future emissions because the ozone is covered significantly even if airlines massively increase, but it's also just an absurd statement saying it gets worse in the future because airlines are capped now and not changing it. Ozone depletion is wrong. UN 23 UN assessment confirms that 99% of ozone depleting substances Montreal Protocol in the city to safeguarding the ozone lead notable recovery. The current policies made ozone expected to recover the ozone hole has been slowly improving. Recovery is on track. The track forwarding their impact starts at 1% in the sunny, 15 ozone depletion. The threat is receiving thanks to only for action and extinction probability 1%. Acidification is not existential. 1 resilient seawater acidity. The fluctuates daily and seasonally by degrees far larger than IPCC scenarios, large in data sets. So fish and calcifiers can internally control pH and drive less alkaline environments. 2nd, self-correction, calcium and limestone are chemically bind, dissolve carbon without changing ocean pH. That's all your overwhelms biodiversity because history and science proves that they would never harm any of the species. There's no internally the space debris. They have not read out any no impact of space debris. It's FANG only. Orbital air with space functions high LDO. Even there are several factors to check. 1, debris spread over the volume of space makes collisions unlikely. 2, it has orbital velocity that is zero pieces makes it deorbit sooner. 3, small objects deorbit in a few months and larger objects can be tracked and avoided. 4, new constellations aren't an issue. They're in low LEO. 5th, new satellite launches conclude the plan. A plan to clean up debris. And 6th, even in the worst case scenarios, also debris hitting these satellites are tiny. Drop every warrant from this hard and just asserting that impact, which means that all these overwhelming means are not risks of impact, even if some debris exists. SAS.
Drop 2 no internal leak arguments. 1, food insecurity is not internal leak. U.S. is not key. American exports are wholly relevant to global hunger because the many importing states are easily the opposite of collapse of U.S. production. Canada, Europe, etc. don't wholly rely on the U.S. That's meteor. Second, it's resilient. The market absorbs shocks. Industry buffer the shocks of mass storage, backup transport, etc. That buffers against the collapse of certain food sources. That's SD. No impact. 1, no escalation. Unrest. And so conflicts happen all the time. Don't escalate to nuclear war. Second, all causes. Data proves unrest is correlated more strongly with land ownership, weak states, corruption, economic disputes, and resource access. This has to be no risk because hotspots would not escalate due to cooperation, risk management, and cars. From the climate wars, impact defense also applies here because it means that there wouldn't be scarcity-induced war. SAFs do nothing for the military. The DoD would still rely on oil's backstop due to fears of not being able to scale up sustainable fuel because biofuels are less transportable and dense to make them far less efficient fuels. That's tough. Drop the warrants. Even if the DoD wants to adopt self-denial, their internal links is still equally as risky because they still invest in oil. All causes thump the air power impact. Their own evidence concedes a slew of other capabilities always being the Air Force is behind, even if they have things like SAFs, modernization F-35s, B-22s, 21s, the developing UAVs, developing the in-cat systems and wars. The shortfall that Berkeley says hurts the Air Force. The Air Force is obsolete, even massively. These capabilities are insufficient due to the modern age of drones, lack of counter-drone capabilities, misdistribution of resources. Meaning the Air Force couldn't fight back even with new SAFs. That's Bruno. Drones have revolutionary superiority and killed the Air Force. Bruno, 25 Air Force doing the least countering of the drones in the sun. The fitness service vision on the Air Force remains wedded to the expensive create platforms in the F-35, which are fully unsuited for countering of the drones. President enormous opportunity cost over 160 million. The Air Force does not have time to the literal lateral can no longer provide superiority.
Good.
Hmm?
Okay, does the counterclaim only solve if people choose to sue?
Yes, but you have not made that argument
Okay.
to ADC,
Yeah.
so I would be very surprised if you didn't do that.
Okay, so what if people choose not to sue?
I mean, I'm gonna just like say this right now. You did not make the substitute in the 2AC, so
Okay,
we do the
I'm-
what they are. We would read cards that say
I'm-
A, plaintiffs exist and wants to do this. B, that a
Would the
single suit is sufficient to solve, because as long as one plaintiff succeeds, it creates a deterrent effect, because the cost of injunctive relief is so high that no corporation would ever risk that happening. It like hurts their bottom line like hell if like they have to pay millions of dollars for the possibility of a suit. Like corporations internalize that.
Okay, so the counterclaim solvency mechanism is like, is it individuals suing airlines, or what is it?
Yes, it is climate suits against the airline industry that provides the ask price mechanism as a form of injunctive relief for them. It
So
forces
the
the
money,
firms to pay.
so the money would go to the individuals,
Yes,
not the government.
yes. But also again, you have not made a where does the money go key argument in the 2AC on any part of this debate.
Okay,
So
well, I actually forgot to start my timer. Do you know how much time? we have?
155. So again, these questions seem kind of irrelevant.
Okay, the courts, how are people able to sue international companies or international airlines?
Okay, so we're gonna say the same thing again. You did not say courts can apply internationally. If you make this episode in the 1AR, we'll tell you to strike it, but also read a slew of pieces of evidence that says A, that climate suits can be applied extraterritorially, because the courts have already set up that basis in Massachusetts EPA. Second, we'll read a slew of spillover cards from a really cool author, I think Michigan cut, that says that every time countries have adopted climate litigation, other countries have followed on. All right, fine, thank you. Other countries have followed on. We have read the evidence described examples like India, etc., that have modeled U.S. climate litigation. And then third, I think there's another.
The Thorstad evidence on case is just about water disputes. Are there any other warrants for why it wouldn't escalate?
I mean, Thorstad is about resource scarcity and lack of resources not being a driving cause in conflict, generally. If it's about, even if it's just about water, that resolves like internal links to like, I don't have food or I don't have like other random resource, because it shows that the internal link in the reaction from states is cooperation and risk
So is it
management.
just about resource scarcity?
Yes, we are answering your internal link that you said that lack of resources cause feedback loop that destroy resources that cause conflict. Our point is that
You read a bunch of cards about Trump. Do any of these say that Trump makes warming inevitable, or just that Trump is like increasing drilling?
Well, we have read evidence. The 1 and C evidence is pretty explicit that he is rolling back so many climate regulations that the other sources of warming would be massive. The card we read in the 2 and C is descriptive of federal oil and gas
Do any of these
projects.
cards actually quantify the effect that he has on warming?
I mean, the evidence that we read in the 2 and C is descriptive of massive increasing in oil and gas production on federal lands. It says that he's ramped that up significantly, which probably is worse than like a couple airlines emitting from planes.
I'm setting it out. Give a second. The order is just the disadvantage. I definitely Does everybody have it? Is everyone good? Okay. Good? Yes. Perfect. Try or die NEG, extinctions inevitable from volcanoes, asteroids, star explosions, nukes, and unintentional bioweapons release, multiplanetary habitats off. That's the Reuters evidence. They've dropped everything but asteroids. Winning just one extinction pathway is auto NEG. NEC after ranging textures on the Titanic. Probability self-extinction is certain by 2090. New warrants, genetic engineering, nanosecond AI career. 10. Possibility for extinction. The number of people with approximately capabilities strong to substantially exponentially grow 10 nations. New trials of bioweapon capable of destroying all humans, genetic engineering, seizing nanosecond AI. Potential for globally lethal events. The consequences is extinction, increase in extinction probability over time to exponential growth of attack. V0 will be becoming a 1 in 2019. Today will be the last info for 7 extinction becomes inevitable. The analysis as soon as humanity remains of one planet society. Even more warrants, asteroids, natural disasters, grammar, class, etc. That takes all of their warrants about asteroids being too far off. Inclusion 23 volcanic eruptions, natural catastrophes, asteroids, supernovas, gamma ray class, a planet uninhabitable, tech advance of life from to the form to becoming a multi-planetary species. Do what extinction, not much we can do. About a supernova colonizing other only rational long-term survival and CFCs, designer pathogens, gene tribes, and asteroid nudging, Sandberg 16, anti-protector race, and a directed annotation we introduce and raise at a high rate of which is not a pathogen, gene tribes, and nudging. Asteroid orbits is not likely to be more. Race that were introduced to become more tech people to be concerned about X risks and the ignore one-shot war impacts the mere existence of nukes, guarantees extinction command. And 13th, mere existence of nukes results in a permanent a risk of devastating consequence in the entire planet, existential threat. Our impacts have to come first, but even if we lose 100% in case, and the risk of the data is low because you have all of the future of humanity in your hands. The associated evidence is arguing that aquatic refuge would solve extinction, not and that space colonization does not solve extinction. No cards as aquatic refuges will occur in it cannot solve our impacts. Yes, asteroid impacts are likely explained above. There is not a warrant for high risk of space colonizations or evidence. It certainly does not rise to the level of saying space colonization is bad. So you should not allow anyone one of your offense. It solves extinction or wave 15 to something that colony is a necessity. If the human race is continue, we have to colonize Mars. So probably no enemies guarantee humans have to be multi-planet species. Mars is ideal. Even small outposts are sufficient. Reuters 21. Give us one is exchange going to see this into relaunch service very difficult to mitigate asteroids, volcano eruptions, cell explosion. Do not have text to prevent nuclear bioweapons. Always a possibility that killed at once. Damaging all outposts and settlements of race. A significantly curtailed. It solves their impact. Space colonization makes nuclear war and warming irrelevant. They might across apply British technology was from signing statements to you. It takes out their communications back to case, but you should not in the context of our arguments that all of the things will inevitably cause extinction on Earth. So we have to get off the rock. In this context, we need to contest them in order to prove it. There's no inevitable extinction. They say permutation to the AFF and repeal the IRA. The counterplan is mutually exclusive. The counterplan abandons all clean energy policies while adopting another alien permutation. It's either severance or intrinsic, which is a voting issue for fairness and clash aviation. Adopt is the opposite of abandon. Lancaster 24 says we choose whether to adopt or abandon in a flexion point of adoption season. But whether to adopt and whether to abandon. Second is it kills tax cuts by crossing HFC's curve or red line. Of no clean energy, the HFC is explicitly demanded no more spending on clean energy or climate change while the plan which means the plan will be considered as Trump and Johnson trying to sneak that by them, steering their support. Clean energy is make or break for HFC support. And for reconciliation, Bondo 326, clean energy could make or break GP reconciliation package and incentivize the clean energy economy around the time block of Trump out to dismantle everything we trust. Climate change Republicans are in the House into one back reconciliation with some things for the government main streets. And today for Johnson, he must rank the Assembly House majority and to pass reconciliation if he can't afford to hold as third. Judge Cake, the counterplan, if they win the permutation, shields will make the counterplan and resolve spending disagreements, but it's unnecessary as the GOP will still figure it out. It will pass without the counterplan. And limited to ski, parts Hiromo and flood 4-3 Congress are working to extend it. Sending tax cuts we're going to get there. Trump and Hillary meeting yesterday, another day working towards it. At the Senate instructions in the next war, we have a credit president and the plan to get this out of going to be adjusted. We will get there. The Bolton evidence is our uniqueness argument will not happen now, but the counterplan resolves that concern and unlocks permanent extension of the CCGA by cutting the IRA within the budget footprint. Those cuts entail $4 trillion, which meets the threshold step of the House. That's unlocks evidence that unifies the GP around tax cuts for resolving every current concern. One, parliamentarian paying it. Deficit hawks. Good. Deficit hawks removes of physical climate luxury. At 327, the IRA credits are physical climate repeal. And these cost provisions used as if they fund permanent growth. A tax reform that benefits the entire economy. This is their aversion to the current bill back and forth through the House. Budget leaders argue the Senate plan will increase the deficit because of lack of spending. Projections make it easy to avoid painful and not the cost of non-enforceable and 100 physical hawks both in both 15% are worried that cutting the cost is your contributing to the building a federal deficit. They say the plan is popular, might be among some Republicans, but the plan ends the Freedom Caucus support for reconciliation. Hard-like conservatives draw a clear red line in their support. And for tax cuts is contingent on absolute opposition to clean energy. That's the GOP is building unity in opposition to climate and clean energy proposals from Democrats, specifically new taxes now to start potentially sequencing tax decisions that come after unity's bill. At 313, the House and Senate have to pass an resolution with a lock reconciliation. The House and Senate are unlocks and Republicans. We're holding united one by one with the unity support and renewable energy and Republicans who hold it. We hold it as accountable both Johnson and when you plan to use reconciliation in favor of fossil fuels of renewables will apply to product tax if the Republicans dismiss arguments noting the tax laws will come later. Sanders proposed an amendment that would add a substantial reduction of carbon emissions if the little long a part of the last all Republicans that vote no on wind, solar, and hydrogen. They say if solves a link, it does not. they can totally fiat the plan, but they cannot fiat a weak links to it. We have explicit evidence that shows that the gap kills tax cuts. Anything else makes it impossible to be negative because the gap can fiat out of every policy system, which is the only viable desirable. Trump is taking a sledgehammer to trade, econ, etc. This was not a writer decide we should get linked to sense. It's a normal means. It's predictable. Anything else. It entirely distorts the literature. They see logical policy maker could do both. All of the above answers apply. A logical policy maker could not do both in this political environment. They see the gap as an agency. The gap has to be Congress one local right measure. 24. The court in local right elimination of rights, which comes from within the agency's general authority of right for challenge the FAA expects more legal challenge to the deliberate right increasing success challenging agency rights. Now have to consider the litigation with respect to decision delayed rulemaking efforts unless it is directed by Congress. Our late previous House member will try to use the CRA to repeal the plan pop in 24 CRA enable Congress to invalid and rules attempted by agencies in action enable Congress to regulate regulation of recent Congress is more aggressively uses CRA. If Congress overturn a regular the agency may not reissue unless Congress passes legislation authorizing reuse. Second is topical mandates. Do I need any of these definitions? Perfect. These terms are all resolution mandates that they specify add them with the on topic about national jurisdiction. We only need to win one word, prefer one functional list, and debate ecosystem testing. The currency words is the only natural predator against apps like ethanol, infusion subsidies, or data centers. The internally pushed drop tax cuts certainly solve space colonization tax increases provided, which occurs if we don't extend tax cuts hammers to space industry. Whittington and says companies would not have the money to build rocket ships and lunar landers, which would shatter NASA capabilities and sensors of pioneers for switching tax fairness and limitless space expansion. No new arguments in the 1 year if you cannot draw a clear delineation between that and a 2 argument, then you should strike it off your flip.
725.
What was the voting issue on the meetings kind of thing?
Severance or intrinsic.
Yep.
Intrinsic.
Can you look on that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
Big concern about
Okay. I'm gonna read that card. Just grab my-
top with like more use cards than everything. Sorry, I did not. Is it this?
Yep.
You said there's 2 docs, right? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, the second one is just like the maintenance for the disc.
Okay.
card.
Can I combine those?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
It's all good.
My numbers.
Just let me know when you're good for it.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, advantage 1. Advantage 2. The quartz counterpart. The sign of Satan's counterpart. The tax force deed. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Eventual gas climate change exists in 1. System clouds, recent wars, wood clouds, disease, and earthquake development are more likely. Second is tipping points are unmodable, and their feed volumes get exponentially worse as time goes on. Carbon source are ignored by the existing cellular emissions. That's right, our models assume there's everything there, and they've ignored what's explained above. The app is the key adaptation for aviation. It takes too long, otherwise it risks becoming irreversible before it can. Group climate wars impact defense, research shortages, migration, etc. Destroy the institutional capacity and cooperation. But first, their expert consensus is from hacks and our evidence is more recent. The Trump circumvention stuff, they conceded the markets our way. They carbon 80% of our IRA funds go to GP state. They won't end fundraising. That's why you should cross-apply to the dissent, which proves the advantage that you need to sample. It doesn't matter, but all the examples are priced and are not specific to aviation. Like Paris and Joe, Baby Joe, Sabi aviation alone is enough. We did not drop all causes. Aviation solves warming alone. All high altitude accelerates the greenhouse gas effects that they release. Categorically worse emissions demands increasing to the only industry that will green itself. But we saw contrast with this metal prove that warming triples like because they track heat, but aviation emits skyrockets now, so the atmosphere
They
of the
consider
transition.
EV transition inevitable, which
They consider EV transition inevitable, which takes it out. You need Star Wars. Okay, SEFs. Yes, extinction, air drop, dominance of voice, prolonged stretch, warfare, modernization of failures on right credibility, not high spots with China and Russia. That's the key evidence. That's our key. And also transition away from evidence. And what is the evidence is better for transportation and safer for refueling, so the DD only has incentives for the plan. They're generally defense conceded that you need to start the SEF sucking out, but the applicant scale them up and make them invisible, which issues the wars. The drones not cause the stuff are wrong. We saw speed, which was the only war, but their evidence is about signaling, which aircraft is key to. The course kind of no sufficiency framing out with the AFF reason their benefits, but the deficits are existential, which means they must solve 100% because they're attached to case impacts, but nobody will on a net benefit alone. They must win this solve or a case that weighs the status quo. Do not judge the category. They did not say it for this category in the 2 and C, but it forces the active debate in 2 worlds. It's worse for net debating and encourages standardized strategies that avoid topic education and skills and just incentivizes them to go for different worlds, which is bad for skills and fairness and our office. Firm to both the lies Congress and the court shields politics and the internal through broader political support. Standing is preserved through both of them happening at the same time. The courts can obviously still hear cases or questions on issues related to them after they do that all the time. Movements is wrong and not true in the context of the category, but perfect category not going for rejecting the argument. Not the team, the state, they conceded all the deficits from states used to cross-apply them. They're all reasons why the federal government would preempt any of the court policies. It's not even though the courts are part of the federal government. The reasoning is that the FAA and all the different statutes that has now prevented them on ruling on these different things unless the plan is done at first through Congress. But even if not in the 2AC, the set of 1C process before that, the individual plaintiffs would have to sue, be that they won't have the resources and the preemption risk definitely answers this. Both of our bomb cards are about the implementation of the court cases, which is obviously the ability for people to sue, which still answers this in the stand they had in the 2C. It relies on too many individual actors and tiny little court cases to solve, but Congress says no, definitely applies because the category is illegal and gets struck down. The bomb evidence says they override and refuse to implement any court mandates. That affects implementation of decisions, which means it will be circumvented. Either they will diverge, and the other courts and the Trump administration will diverge from the ruling, or just will not comply with it, which cuts any ability for people to sue under that. Yes, it's applicable. If circumvention happens now, then new cases do not matter. Next, this is science things happen. Condoms beverage of the argument for deterrence committing in terms of voice intervention. 1, research. Impossible to predict every opportunity cost. Examining positions is good for strategic thinking. Education is the only external. 2, strategy. Double down. Have no cost cross-supply offense. The 3 is defense. A, pre-round conduct can determine the challenges beforehand. B, other rounds solve their impact but not ours. D, dispo. 4, dispo solve next flex. Allows multiple conditions. Negative blocking crosses 10 points. The topic is neg bias. They said it's arbitrary and it doesn't solve theory and offense and crosses stress and theory is never going to be arbitrary compared. And models is supreme, but we explained above why it's able to solve for their office. Next, critical thinking pre-round and prep solves that conduct doesn't solve it because we don't make good decisions because ability to kick plan produce random proliferation of arguments. Next, NEG, flex, and innovation are both solved by this, but allows multiple positions while checking against the possibilities and the negative. The blocking process counterplays the topic is NEG bias. Duke's not know was linear conduct makes it impossible. It is high. Terms of the applicant to repeal the IRAs based on the solvency applicant in the 1 and T, which means that it's not severance or intrinsic reject the argument of the team, but it's not a voting issue. It's based on the solvency applicant and including both of the policies. Competition card is about ranked choice voting, which is obviously not a federal energy policy, doesn't apply, but the app is sufficient to still solve for the aviation industry. So there's no dissent to this. Every other card is just a question of the uniqueness and debate with the firm doesn't lead because it was just on the IRA. The judge can dooms the dissent, but it's bad forces the app to debate in two worlds. It's worse for education and incentivizes battling debate. And they conceded the IRA is bipartisan, which I extended on cases from the 2AC, which means it won't get repealed if they fail. It dissent to doing it anyway, which is solving that benefit. But budget resolutions, the Senate wants low fours that are orders of magnitude lower than anything the House figures. That's bullshit. They need identical figures to advance anything. The GOP is split. Harmony 4-3. Even if we can move with the resolutions, some piece of realize that our conference is still going to measure over the current policy based on no matter how they move and something around a ground of the budget was Republicans on the way to the House side instead of going to targets for against Medicaid. Honeymoon's over. Honeymoon's over. Still goes for 3. Trump said we come to MFs or probably the Republican frustration here with all of a confident opposition to trust policy to whatever controversy combination of letters later. Both of the territory really helps the president to LKG replace advances for me. Agenda and resources specifically to this watch and follow over. This bill they're split now if you're sitting for one. House for one and you're setting the responding to the targets ratio for the federal over budget resolution considered in order to pass the $3 billion House for the need identical budget so having the ability to work and instructions fit. It also might be a bus, verse 327. When he was voted to the parliamentary position of parliamentary reconciliation was notably the Peru and so Morgan 327. Rogated for whatever he was tested immigration with the Medicaid evidence and linking the version adding the Medicaid practice and constitutional because Medicaid tax credit or market of mission to retain the credits really far from down subsidial. They were not back for the purpose of his opposition for the within loss and would not support the reasons as the other time. While planning its reduction for Republicans not to be more than to the letter seeing local tax rebating capital. One more extra pressure for Republicans to cut spending. The link to be the plan certainly doesn't link bipartisan support for boosting SCA production. That's the more evidence and unity. Price 24. Also, we're devices with the government and media by partisan support by the SCA for the Senate aviation for aviation freedom policy because you know for public efficiency aircraft, but for the environment and national security. 3. Dissenters creation. 23. If you have no support for regional issues, you need to pressure for both you and the environment and national coalition to go in the way around. Is one of the primary ways to negotiate with issues to Republicans. 4. Alignment. Blackwater. 24. Opposition to pressure the SCA to by partisan the movement of coalition on such things as positive and as the SCA needed to assure American energy investment and national security of ours. We need this last part. Finally, the impact in all the different impacts on matter space while itself is faced suitable space while fails thus and then stretching evidence of 2019. There's a little consensus of what colonization necessary responsible to sustain environment how these people just all government required continued materials for also active ability to deliver in order to possibly ability to this tech. Computer high tech.
7:35.
Yeah.
court's counter plan. Tax cuts disadd. Signing statements 1, 2.
Say that one more time.
Court's counter plan. Disadd. Signing statements
Okay.
1, 2. Cards. Yes, I am sending one, and then Ethan will send one during the speech. Come on. Okay, my card is sent. Let me know when everyone gets that.
I always click the stupid add to drive.
I do that all the time. I have like a whole bunch of speech docs in Google Drive
Yeah.
that I just don't want.
Yeah. File.
I would wait, did you say there were gonna be 2?
Yes, Ethan will send a card in just a second.
Like during the speech?
During the speech.
Oh, okay.
Because
I
I
thought we were
sorry.
ready for that.
Because I
Okay.
yeah, I forgot to copy paste it before the timer went off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, stay over here.
We good?
Yep. Yeah.
The counterpoint solves the AFF and implements attacks on airline missions as a form of injunctive relief, spurring comments to stop harmful behavior, and create a deterrent effect that's correlate. Use fishing therapy, resting on benefit, drastically outweighs the receiving deficit. Yes, use fishing therapy. They will lowers the risk of their impacts and makes it not outweigh anything else. Any other therapy means that you should just categorically ignore defense, which is wrong. Makes absolutely zero sense. Judge through the counterpoint about that benefit they win it. Deficit of permutation is simply a defensive test of competition. Yes, judge gets a logical sanction of intentionality is key. The check against the AFF having the first and last speech because they get the 2 AR. They can lie for 6 minutes. It's once just defense, which means that the chance is the impact defense to lower the rest of the impacts out. Just that alone because we'll still extend your arguments on the case. Now, permutation do both, at least in the politics one, it includes legislation drop. That the AFF has to be legislation because the HFT gets passed off. If we frame it through the link, because we read evidence says that the HFT's red line is clean energy policy now in the context of budget negotiation, which is the TFP evidence second. 0 standing drop, which is that there's no thing that any person could blame because it satisfies causation because it means that every single time that there would be no standing because there's already a tax that implemented that means that the only policy that would exist is the tax. The deficits from states do not apply all the evidence about state preemption by the federal government on state laws that is hyper-specific to how states implement things. There's not any explanation in the 1 ER for how this preempts. It applies to the court's counterpoint, so any reason in the 2 ER will be new and you should strike it off your flow. Second, they dropped dual via fiat from circumvention, which means that we get to fiat how actors work, comply with the counterplan, etc. Because they said they get that in the 2AC, which solves every single preemption argument because it relies on a false premise that other actors of the federal government would preempt the courts and it wouldn't happen. Next argument was the suit stuff. 1, evidence is about no evidence for this, which means they cannot just get a B, lower standing to the floor because it gets a pressure that means that any climate suit that exists now, Massachusetts v. EPA, Juliana v. US, etc., all cases that already exist, it just gives a standing, the possibility for them to do it, it puts standing at the floor. Third, deterrence alone is effective. The perception of a new environmental standing doctrine that compels that acting like the app is that corporations would not want to threaten their bottom line because it would deter. They have not answered this argument, which is in 2C cross-sex. So if they get a deficit from cross-sex, we get an answer from cross-sex. Next argument is the too many actor stuff. Well, the too many actor stuff is irrelevant because A, it's not implemented by the executive. They have just mishandled the counterplan. The card that they have read about certain which is in the context of courts forcing executive action to happen. That is not the counterplan. It's just a form of injunctive relief as that he pays out towards defendants. B, circuit the durable fiat solves. They get it. They dropped it, which means that we get to force the executive compliance if we have to. The dissent. It's try or die for face colonization. The 1 ER has dropped a slew of accidental risks that ensure the extinction is inevitable. Super volcano, star explosion, nuclear war, bioweapons, AI, asteroids, etc. All insured must get off the rocket at all costs. Drop extinction scenarios that weigh everything. Asteroids, super volcanoes that have 0 impact. Defeating the AFF simply rearranging deck chairs of the Titanic because solving AFF's impact is simply bide your time until we go extinct. If we win, significant defense to the impact impacts, then a super small risk of descent is more than sufficient to outweigh because we are dealing with near infinite value of those generations. Magnitude probability must come first. You know, extinction is inevitable, which means you should overestimate those risks because we are psychologically predisposed exposed to buck pass and discount future value. They have conceded parts of the dissent. That means they can never start at 0% risk even if they win the entirety of their defense, because its potential of colonization is the highest magnitude. The permutation is mutually exclusive. The kind of abandons all clean energy policies while adopting another any permutation to severance or intrinsic which vote issue for fairness and class evasion. Drop that adopt is the opposite of abandon, which means they could never adopt both. No counter definition means that even if it is imprecise because it's about the right charge voting, it's irrelevant because it's a context of defining that they are distinct actions. Second, it kills taxes by costing the HFC skill level on no clean energy. The HFC is explicitly demanded or no more spending on clean energy or climate change, which just means the plan would be construed as Trump and Johnson trying to sneak that by them, which is 0 so spore. Judge take the counter if they win. The permutation shields the link. It resolves the counter resolves many disagreements, but is unnecessary as the GOP will still figure it out. Trump evidence that postdates everything that they have read in the 1 hour flooded description of the GOP action promises that they have the momentum to figure it out. There's new meetings coming over the next 2 days where Trump is going to work with and push the House to do what they want. The IRA repeal stuff is irrelevant because yes, even if the IRA is going to be repealed inevitably, it's not going to be used for the budget negotiation, which is our uniqueness evidence, which means that only the counterpoint fiat that it is, which isn't solve the argument. Framing issue for all the uniqueness cards is that two things. A, it does not assume the uniqueness counterpoint that solves all the issues that the deficit hawks in the House have with the budget resolution. It gives them funding that matches the threshold that they have asked for. Second, none of their evidence assumes that the Senate voted on this morning, which means that there is GOP unity now because the GOP is getting behind the budget, but it's not in the House, and that means that there's unity also in the House, but it only the chance of the risk at the AFF breaks the red lines. Third, the tariff stuff liberation motivates the GOP. Hallshack. Fourth, three Trump tariffs of royal markets and raise of fear. Obviously, liberation, raise of fear, tax legislation reaction. Liberation, swift and talks for the plunging the most. This is the pressure on Republicans to tax. Good, please, markets and spur. Growth. The link, all the link cards that they've read in the 1 year are irrelevant. Not a single card talks about the House Freedom Caucus or the tax part of the AFF, which is the threshold and the red line that we have said is the evidence. A, the SES might be popular generally, but it's irrelevant because it's a question of the tax evidence that we have read in the 1 hour. Second, in the second, it's about the House Freedom Caucus. You get pissed because clean energy is bad and not something they want, which is above. The impact defense is new. Strike it off your flow. No reason for why space fall impossible. B, give it.
No, what card do you want?
Actually, the answer is space fall impossible.
The card at the bottom of the 1 here.
I'm going to go to the counterpoint. Conditionality is good. The impact is dead flex 6. Need to be able to choose their strategy because otherwise new 2AC offensive counterpoints this as an aspect. Debate impossible. Logical outcome of their models. The Afghans only read offensive intrinsic to the plan of the 2ACs that can bait out a logical counterpoints and solve. 1AC turtle links with link dissents, 2 dissents that don't solve their add-ons. We say NEG seems to be able to kick arguments, otherwise every round is the after you do something but tiny but punching the NEG for introducing impact. Draw from politics that Trump is thinking he is sledgehammer to dissent, so try to die for NEG flex. And takes out their arguments and counterpoint being NEG biased, they chose the app. Spree, version left. This one does not solve this offense. A, it's intrinsic. The conduct because it requires the NEG be able to kick adversaries with every offense applied. B, dispose of negotiating with calf terrorism. They choose what the 2 goes for. Three pre-on conduct doesn't solve because we have to test it in the debate. Debate voting on ways, fairness, and fairness into education because we have no incentive to learn if we lose every debate while doing so. Back to the dissent is technically feasible. Urban, the left Mars, progression process all right materials and requirements borderline with the Mars and which harm and nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen all. This simple form of the all done is primary plus method of the template board. We go with an ocean market ocean back to conduct, but their offense is not intrinsic conditionality. One, research our term solves this question what the research is about. Second, strategy it's inevitable because there are arguments that not obviously that skew gateway issues, procedural dissent, etc. does not skew. They have to defend the parts of the plane's internal links and dispo doesn't solve skew because it force perms or cover random hash with I have no ideas about dissent make theory inevitable.
That's what I also.
It's just the deception. Is anyone not good? I'm going for the straight turn, so I'm not going to go to the counterplan. I'll explicitly concede the counterplan is not linked to net benefit, so it would have no effect on Congress in the rulemaking process, so it cannot access the link turn, which only the AFF can access. Go to the uniqueness counterplan. It was never permed to both. It was permed to the AFF and repeal the IRA. Dropped based off solvency advocates in the 1 and C. The AFF is sufficient to still solve for the aviation industry. It's functionally legit because the counterplan removes all clean energy policies, but the permutation just repeals the IRA. That avoids our competition argument that proves that the perm shields the net benefit because the competition card is about ranked choice voting, not federal energy policy, and proves that repealing the IRA alone is sufficient to solve per the 1 and C evidence, which they keep referring back to. Every other card is a question of the uniqueness and link debate, but the permutation does not link because it was just about the IRA, which they have just fumbled this entire debate because they've assumed it was permutation to both. If you do judge kick it, then it dooms the DA, but it's bad. If you do judge kick it, then it dooms the DA because they have no uniqueness, but the permutation is able to shield it. Not go to the uniqueness debate proper. Congress does not have a bill and a will not for the coming months, which should lower your threshold to vote on the straight turn. They must win tax cuts bill 100% gets finished and passes successfully now because the impact is dependent on end passage and complete rollout of the money, but all of our uniqueness evidence is either more recent or from the same time frame, so any reason why current budget negotiations destroy unity and passage is sufficient for you to even lean AFF on uniqueness. The 2NR shat the bed on uniqueness. The 1AR read multiple distinct takeouts and they dropped all of them and did not extend a single card. I only have to answer 3 arguments. 1, uniqueness counterplan does not solve. Our evidence about the IRA proves it does not matter anyway. The clean energy policy is not, quote, the threshold they asked for. There are tons of other issues with the budget bill now the counterplan just ignores, which were all listed in the 1AR thumpers cards, which they just dropped. Second is that this morning's vote does not matter, but they have to extend no evidence of, they have extended no evidence about how it strengthens unity for the bigger bill. Only the Senate approved their budget resolution. It does not align with the House's, so there's still tons more work to do. Third is that the 2NR Hallis Act evidence. I'll do the Trumpers here. They're huge. The 1AR conceded Stokel's evidence says the GOP is not happy with Trump right now, which guts his ability to hold fringe Republicans in line with the budget. A is tariffs, destroying the economy and are impeding the, quote, sweeping agenda. The GOP is so furious they're refusing to cooperate to punish Trump. B, Wisconsin special elections. He and Elon signed off on a $25 million campaign that failed and looked horrible on the party. They are livid and looking for ways to lash out and choosing to do it over tax cuts in the budget. C is Signal group chat. His approval ratings are so low right now, and it was so embarrassing for the party that they are furious and want to disassociate with the admin. D is 2NR Hasselhack. It just says tariffs are bad, true, and that's a reporter's take on why that should increase pressure on the GOP. He does not cite any Congress people saying that that's true, but Sokos from the same day does, and they cut the first 3 paragraphs, and the rest of the article says why the bill cannot solve. Now, a couple frames for uniqueness. 1 is budget resolutions. The Senate wants low floors that are orders of magnitude lower than the House figures. That's Bolton. They need identical figures to advance anything. Carney says that some Republicans are still facing red flags over the policy baseline, and some are worried about spending cuts to Medicaid. Dropped. Bolton is specific to tax cuts and says they are intrinsic to the reconciliation bill and debt ceiling, which does not pass now. This should be a frame for all their evidence that talks about tax cuts specifically, but their evidence also concedes it must be passed to the same bill, which is tanked. McPherson says they're still split on lowering spending targets in the House. They have not voted this morning. Both chambers need identical budgets in order to move on, and they do not after today. This is just Congress 101. Third is the parliamentarian. She's supposed to make a ruling about the price tag Congress can attach to Trump's 2017 tax cut extension, and senators like Cassidy and Young are pushing back even if she has rules in their favor. Nothing can happen until the ruling. Burns says says it'll be a bust if anyone proves the baseline, it will still violate the Byrd rule. Also dropped. 4 is SALT. State and local taxes, they cannot agree on core provisions on single bill passage. Senators like Hawley are on a holdout on Medicaid cuts, like senators like Paul are on a holdout on the debt ceiling. 1AR Morgan says tax cut, and immigration leave the debt ceiling hanging, and no one is on board. Also dropped, also means the uniqueness counterplan cannot solve. Go to the link. The link turn is basically 100. Their link evidence for the 1NC and the 1NR is just about climate policies broadly, but only we have evidence about Senate Republicans specifically. If you do not know after this debate how the passage of the plan uniquely inhibits the bill from being passed, then you should have a super low threshold for voting affirmative. The link debate is terrible. The 1NR evidence was all assumed by the 1AR when the blog explicitly conceded the 2AC evidence that the IRA is popular and Republicans do not want to repeal it now, and their evidence just says the Republicans do not want subsidies. The Pike and card is from February and definitely does not assume our 1AR uniqueness evidence that the GOP is so fractured now due to all the Trump policies from the past weeks, which disproves the link because there is zero unity. Framing issue for the ethanol link turn is that the 1NR did not breathe a word on it, neither did the 2NR, so they have no inroads into our offense, and the link turn certainly outweighs the link. We are the only ones winning the direction of the link in this debate. Framing issue for the 2NR link extension is that it was horrible. They made one argument that our evidence does not assume tax and said, quote, taxes are unpopular with zero warrant. You do not know why taxes are unpopular beyond the 2NR tagline extension, and they do not explain it for you, so you do not go read the card to establish the link when it is near zero. Debate is a communicative activity. Even if you understood why taxes are unpopular in the 1NR, the 2NR does not explain it, so you do not give it to them because that lets the NEG get away with making 100 arguments in the blog and getting to extend all of them in the 2NR with no warrants, which kills our strategy and makes it impossible to ever win. They have pieces of evidence from fringe lobbies in Congress and an economy-wide carbon tax and subsidies, which is not reflective of the plan or the majority of Congress, which was conceded. They do not have evidence specific to aviation of the plan itself. Dropped the plan is massive link turn. It saves the ethanol lobby and farming collapse, not extending the food wars terminal. They dropped the entire industry is going to collapse now because EV demand is causing a shift away from ethanol. The plan saves the Republican Party, and while solving climate change, none of their link, write that thing up for me. None of their link evidence assumes that we saved one of the Republicans' most prized possessions in the process. Only we have evidence that saving ethanol is sufficient to overcome any congressional pushback, which answers the generic 2NR link extension. But we are simply outcarding them on the link debate and link specificity. You should not reward the lackluster generic 2NR link spin. 1. Our Meyer evidence indicates that a majority of senators across the aisle support the plan. It's included in bipartisan farm bills, which means more congressmen like the plan than dislike it. That's Martin. That's sufficient to overcome any pushback the NEG could garner. The 1AR price evidence says there is bipartisan support for SAF and aviation caucus, which solves the environment and national security, both of which the GOP can get behind. Second is onshoring energy production. It's the key focus of the Trump campaign now. Wagmester was dropped, indicates the SAFs enable domestic food production. Dropped, it's an investment into national security and farmers, which Republicans love. Third is consensus. Even fringe Republicans like SAFs, especially fiscal hawks, which are the most likely not to vote yes on a death spending measure. The ethanol lobby has historically drowned out Congress and has them in their back pocket, which outweighs the link.